Let's continue our discussion of the laws of Tzitzis. We're going to talk a little bit today about the time of day in which one should wear Tzitzis and what types of garments need Tzitzis. So the main thing to understand is that there is a machlekes rishonim. There's a dispute amongst authorities from the Middle Ages, basically between the Rosh and the Rambam, as to what is the proper time for tzitzis. Meaning, everyone agrees tzitzis are a daytime mitzvah. The question is, does that mean that it's only for garments that are worn during the day? Or does it mean that it actually has to be daylight? So, our good friend, Harav Yosef Karo, the author of Shulchan Aruch and the author of the Beis Yosef, along with many other contemporaries between the time period of those opinions and his own day, came up with a great idea. That basically, when it comes to saying the blessing on tzitzis, we're going to make that time-bound. Okay, we already discussed in a previous class what that means to be time-bound. But what we're going to do now is talk about the time requirements to say the blessing. So even though you can wear tzitzis all day, and one is encouraged to wear tzitzis all day and even into the evening, we're going to specifically deal with here the time frame in which to recite the blessing on tzitzis, and we'll also talk about what garments. So the earliest time to say a bracha on tzitzis is when you have enough natural light to basically recognize someone who's standing about 6 feet away from you, or to recognize the different colors in the tzitzis if tzitzis had both blue and white in them, which they did back in the day. And nowadays too, some people have that. That's known as Mishayakir, all right, in Hebrew, Mishayakir. Okay, so they are equivalent, and they basically are about sometime between 35 to 60 minutes before sunrise. So we have to actually look at a halakha calendar to determine where you fall out in your location for that time period. But it's basically, you start to see the cracks of dawn over the edge of the skyline. So basically, there are ways to be lenient. Some people go as far back as 72 minutes before sunrise, but basically that's the time when you should make the blessing. Okay, you could keep tzitzis on at that time. You could wear them, no problem. Okay, and you could even put tzitzis on at night. However, the problem is that since according to the Rosh, one would make a blessing on a daytime garment worn at night, it's therefore preferable to not put them on at night, but to put them on while it's still daylight out. Okay, and that's why one should not be wearing a large talis at night, so that way you don't put yourself in a situation of a unlikely blessing. Let's talk about the types of garments. Okay, what garments? Let's talk about the materials. Okay. So there's a dispute, a machlokes between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. So for Sephardic opinions, basically it's preferable to always wear garments that are made of wool. That's the most important thing. The second most important thing is just to wear tzitzis. But the Shulchan Aruch holds that only wool garments have a Torah obligation to have tzitzis strings, and therefore you should preferably wear that. The Ashkenazi opinion is that all materials are included in the Torah obligation, so he says that you can wear anything that you want to. So it's very common for people to wear garments made of cotton, what they call the t-shirt tzitzis or tzitzit, that have wool strings at the end of them, and that would be okay. Many later authorities, such as the Mishnah Berurah, the Chazon Ish, and so on, recommend that people should focus on wearing wool. But if that becomes difficult, listen, at least you're doing the mitzvah of tzitzis, and you can rely on the Ramah to say that it doesn't matter. But if you wanted to make even the Shulchan Aruch happy with you, you could wear it out of wool. So some people also nowadays wear the techeles or techelet, the blue strands. I recommend looking at the Patil Techelet website to understanding more about that, and talking to your local rabbi about whether or not it's a good idea to wear those strings, how to do it. It's also expensive. See whether it's a good thing. So those are the type of things that should be worn. Now, in terms of other garment materials, so I mentioned wool and I mentioned cotton. Linen is also acceptable, except it's not possible to make blue strings out of linen. And so therefore the custom has become to not wear a linen garment that's required in tzitzis, because one would have to then actually put only a wool string in there to make tzitzis. This is a very complicated sugya in halacha about mixing wool and linen together to make tzitzis, as normally a mixture of wool and linen is prohibited because it's called a prohibited mixture known as shatnez. But for tzitzis, that's different. But the custom has developed to not wear a talus made out of linen in general, just for this reason. Garments made out of leather should not be worn in a four-corner garment, and they are exempt from tzitzis. So some people equate leather with other synthetic materials. So things like polyester, nylon, and rayon. These things would be exempt, would be putter from the mitzvah of tzitzis. Some people say differently. So, generally speaking, Rav Moshe Feinstein in Igros Moshe, this is Orach Chaim Volume 2, number 1, he's the one who says not to wear that. And that tends to be a very common practice in the United States. However, several Israeli decisors disagreed with that. So some people from Israel wear them. It's very common in the Israeli military, to provide tzitzis that are made from mesh that are mostly polyester, and to put tzitzis on them as a result of that. And we generally try to find leniencies for soldiers to both be comfortable while in their full gear and fulfill as many mitzvahs at the same time. So it's definitely praiseworthy to do that. However, it's preferable not to do that. One should also know that one other thing interesting about garments is that you actually have to own it. If it's borrowed, you're not really fulfilling the mitzvah completely, because it should actually be yours. But that's just something to consider. And one other thing is that if you stole it, you're not allowed to make a blessing on it. So if you're not sure if it belongs to you or doesn't belong to you, you should clarify that before making the blessing on your tzitzis. Hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us in our class on laws of tzitzis.